The dinner party test. She's mid-sentence when she stops. Not a pause, a full stop. The kind that makes everyone at the table look up from their wine. She was talking about remote work policies, something about Slack notifications, and then just cut herself off. Blinked. Restarted with a completely different angle about attention residue. You watch the glances ping around the table, the micro-expressions, that specific flavor of secondhand embarrassment people get when someone can't finish a coherent thought. Two people exchanged a look that said scattered without speaking. Someone jumped in to rescue the conversation, redirecting to something easier, something she could handle. You probably thought the same thing they did. Here's what actually happened. Her brain ran 4 parallel simulations of how that sentence could land. She saw the initial framing was imprecise, technically accurate, but would trigger a defensive reaction from the product manager who's insecure about team communication. So she aborted midstream and rerouted to a framework that would land without collateral damage. The whole calculation took 1.3 seconds. To everyone else, it looked like she forgot what she was saying. This is the dinner party test you didn't know you were taking. Every social gathering is a real-time IQ screener, and most people are failing it in the exact opposite direction they think. You're reading awkward pauses as low intelligence, hesitation as incompetence, self-correction as uncertainty. And you're wrong every single time. Because here's what nobody tells you about actual cognitive horsepower. It doesn't look smooth, it looks glitchy. It looks like someone who can't get their words out because their brain is doing something your brain doesn't attempt, running multiple scenarios before committing to output. That's not a speech problem. That's a processing surplus. The neuroscience backs this up in ways that should make you uncomfortable. Studies on prefrontal cortex activity show that high-functioning brains generate significantly more decision noise, competing pathways firing simultaneously before one wins out. To an observer, this reads as hesitation. Internally, it's a cognitive tournament where the best option survives. You know what doesn't generate decision noise? Autopilot, scripted responses, saying the first thing that comes to mind because you're not considering alternatives. That person at dinner who spoke smoothly, confidently, never breaking stride? They weren't thinking, they were performing. And you rewarded them for it with your attention and approval while dismissing the person who was actually problem-solving in real time. This isn't just about dinner parties. This is about every meeting you've been in, every interview you've conducted, every first date you've judged. You've been using social fluency as a proxy for intelligence, and social fluency is just practiced output. It's the cognitive equivalent of mistaking a teleprompter for spontaneous insight. So here's your central problem. The behaviors you've been taught to read as markers of competence are actually markers of efficiency, not depth. And the behaviors you read as red flags, the interruptions, the awkward pauses, the weird tangents, those are your only reliable indicators that someone's brain is doing more than executing cached routines, which means you've probably dismissed someone brilliant this week. Maybe today, maybe at your own dinner party while you were congratulating yourself for keeping conversation flowing. And here's the part that should sting. If you're reading this and getting defensive, if you're mentally listing all the smooth-talking, intelligent people you know as counterexamples, if you're already drafting a comment about how correlation isn't causation, you're proving the point. Because truly intelligent people, they don't need to defend their intelligence. They're too busy doing what that woman at dinner was doing, thinking about something 3 steps deeper than the conversation you're having, while you mistake their recalibration for confusion. The question isn't whether you're intelligent. The question is whether you're willing to look unintelligent long enough to actually think. Now let me show you exactly what I mean. The behaviors you're missing. Watch her in the Monday morning stand-up. She's explaining the database migration issue, gets halfway through her technical explanation, then stops. Restarts. Takes a different angle. Backtracks to clarify a term. Interrupts her own interruption to add context. To everyone on the Zoom call, she looks unprepared, flustered, like she didn't think through what she was going to say. Someone types a message in the side channel, probably a joke about coffee not kicking in yet. Here's what you're not seeing. Her brain just outpaced her mouth by 3 cognitive steps. She started with the technical explanation, realized mid-sentence it assumed knowledge the team didn't have, calculated that explaining the prerequisite concept would take 40 seconds and derail her point, decided to reframe using an analogy instead, assessed whether the analogy would land or create more confusion, and chose a third path, leading with the business impact, then backfilling the technical details. That entire decision tree happened in the space between "so the migration" and "actually, let me back up." You think in straight lines. She's navigating a choose-your-own-adventure book in real time. Your smooth delivery isn't a sign of superior cognition. It's a sign you're only considering one path, the path of least resistance. The first thing that occurred to you. Working memory research shows that high-capacity thinkers generate significantly more candidate responses before selecting output. Brain imaging studies reveal more activity in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for evaluating multiple options simultaneously. They're not scattered. They're sorting. Here's the contrast that should bother you. You finish sentences confidently because you're not considering alternatives. You commit to your first draft and deliver it as final. She's live editing, optimizing for precision over fluency. You've done this exactly once in your life. When you were anxious, when the stakes were high and you couldn't afford to say the wrong thing. That elevated state of think before you speak, that's her baseline. She does it reflexively, not because she's nervous, but because her brain automatically runs quality control on output. Every time someone restarts mid-sentence, they're choosing accuracy over performance. They're prioritizing the right words over the smooth words, and you're punishing them for it with your judgment and your eye rolls and your side channel jokes. If you never correct yourself mid-thought, you're not thinking, you're reciting. You're running cached scripts. You're the human equivalent of autocomplete, delivering the most statistically probable next word without considering whether it's the most accurate one. But that's not even the behavior that gets them labeled as difficult. The product kickoff meeting is 40 minutes in. The VP has walked through the roadmap. The designer has presented mock-ups and everyone's nodding along. Then the new developer raises her hand. Why are we building this feature at all? The room temperature drops 5 degrees. Not, how should we build it? That would be collaborative. Not, when should we ship it? That would be pragmatic. She's questioning the foundational assumption, the one everyone agreed on in the pre-meeting. The one that's already been socialized with stakeholders. You watch the VP's face do that thing where they smile with their mouth but not their eyes. We covered the user research in the deck. Did you have a specific concern about the data? She did not read the room. Except she did. She read it perfectly. She just decided the truth mattered more than the temperature. Here's what actually happened. She's the only person in that room who realized you're all following a rule no one remembers the origin of. The feature got greenlit because it was in last quarter's strategy doc. The strategy doc included it because a customer mentioned it 9 months ago. The customer mentioned it because their boss asked them for feedback, and they didn't want to say everything's fine. And now you're spending 6 weeks of engineering time on a feature that emerged from social obligation, not user need. But she's the problem. Because she asked, this is first principles thinking, and it's violence to people who operate on inherited wisdom. Elon Musk calls it reasoning from first principles. Philosophers call it the Socratic method. You call it not paying attention during the pre-read. The contrast is simple. Smart people question foundations. Average people protect their ego. Because here's what that question actually threatened. Not the feature, but everyone's credibility. If the feature isn't justified, then the VP greenlit something without proper diligence. The PM didn't catch it. The designer worked on the wrong problem. Everyone in that room who nodded along just revealed they weren't thinking, they were complying. Her question didn't challenge the feature. It challenged the collective delusion that everyone had done their homework. And that's why the room turned cold. Not because she was wrong, but because she might be right. And if she's right, then everyone else was asleep at the wheel, mistaking consensus for validation. Studies on group dynamics show that teams converge on shared assumptions within the first 15 minutes of collaboration, then spend the rest of their time reinforcing those assumptions rather than testing them. It's called collective cognitive entrenchment. The person who breaks that pattern isn't disruptive. They're doing the cognitive labor everyone else outsourced to groupthink. You know what's easier than questioning assumptions, accepting them, nodding along, waiting for someone else to catch the flaw? And then, if it all goes sideways, you've got plausible deniability because you were being a team player. She doesn't have that luxury. Her brain won't let her coast on inherited logic. It keeps asking, but why, until it hits bedrock. And bedrock is usually 3 layers deeper than where your team stops digging. The embarrassment you feel for her, that secondhand cringe when she asks the dumb question, that's not empathy. That's your fear of looking dumb. You're projecting your own social anxiety onto someone who doesn't share it. Because intelligence isn't knowing the answers everyone already has. Intelligence is knowing which questions everyone else is too scared to ask. It's being willing to look naive, difficult, or out of touch in service of getting to the truth. And here's your harsh reality. Every meeting where you stayed quiet to preserve social capital, she spoke up to preserve intellectual integrity. You traded accuracy for approval. She didn't. Which brings us to what they do with silence. The uncomfortable behaviors. You're in the break room with 3 coworkers. Someone mentions the company all hands. Another person agrees it was too long. Third person makes a joke about the CEO's slide animations. Everyone laughs. The conversation hits a natural endpoint. Then, silence. 4 seconds. 6. 8. Your heart rate spikes. Someone needs to say something. The silence is becoming awkward. You open your mouth to mention literally anything, the weather, weekend plans, that article you didn't actually read but saw the headline for. The fourth person, the one who hasn't spoken yet, is just standing there, sipping coffee, completely unbothered, not scrambling for conversational filler, not performing interest, just existing in the silence. You fill it because someone has to. You mention the weather. Here's what just happened. While you were word vomiting to ease your own social anxiety, she was selecting from 47 possible responses, decided none of them added value, and chose silence. You think she's awkward. She thinks you're compulsive. The neuroscience of impulse control is uncomfortable in its implications. Studies on delayed gratification show that the ability to tolerate discomfort, to sit in uncertainty without reactive behavior, correlates with prefrontal cortex development. Children who can wait for the second marshmallow aren't more patient. They're better at emotional regulation under ambiguity. You just failed the adult version of the marshmallow test. The test wasn't, can you make conversation? The test was, can you tolerate silence without reflexively filling it with noise? Reactive people speak to fill space. Reflective people speak to add value. And here's your meta layer. Your need to fill silence isn't social grace. It's anxiety performing as contribution. You're not making things comfortable, you're making yourself comfortable. The silence didn't bother her. It bothered you. And rather than sit with your discomfort, you externalized it as speech and called it social skills. Meanwhile, she was doing something your brain doesn't attempt, running a cost-benefit analysis on every potential utterance. Does this observation add new information? Does this joke land without punching down? Does this question deepen the conversation or just extend it? If the answer to all three is no, then silence is the higher value option. But you can't tolerate that calculation time. You experience her pause as absence. You fill the gap before she's finished processing, and then you judge her for not keeping up with your reflexive output. Brain imaging studies show that people with higher cognitive control exhibit more activity in the anterior cingulate cortex during conversational pauses, the region responsible for conflict monitoring and error detection. They're not zoning out. They're quality checking every possible response against a dozen evaluation criteria you don't even know exist. You speak in first drafts, she speaks in final drafts. The difference is invisible to you because you can't see the editing process, only the output gap. If silence makes you uncomfortable around someone, you're probably in the presence of actual thinking. If you can have a comfortable silence with someone, they're either cognitively matched to you or they've given up trying to contribute above your processing threshold. Here's your harsh conclusion. Every rushed word you speak is another thought you didn't have. Every reflexive comment is another analysis you didn't run. Every time you fill dead air, you're choosing social comfort over cognitive depth. She's not awkward. She's not rude. She's just refusing to treat conversation like a performance obligation. And you're calling it a deficit because it highlights your inability to sit with uncertainty. But here's the behavior that really confuses people. He didn't remember your name. You met 3 weeks ago at the team offsite, had a 20-minute conversation about fantasy football, and when you saw him in the elevator yesterday, he hit you with, "Hey, you." Not even a smooth recovery. Just blank-faced acknowledgement that he had no idea who you were. Or she missed your birthday. You've worked together for 2 years, your birthday is on the shared calendar, and she didn't even send a Slack emoji. Meanwhile, she remembered the exact date of a study you mentioned 8 months ago in a completely different conversation. Or they spaced on the meeting, the one you scheduled 2 weeks in advance, sent 3 reminders about, and they just didn't show up. When you asked about it, they looked genuinely confused, checked their calendar, and said, "Oh, I completely missed that." Your interpretation, careless, rude, doesn't value relationships, self-absorbed. Here's the actual explanation. Their brain triaged your birthday as non-essential data while solving a pattern you haven't noticed yet. This is cognitive load theory in action, and it's brutal in its efficiency. The human brain has finite working memory, roughly 7 chunks of active information at any given time. High-functioning brains are ruthless about what gets loaded into those slots. Your name? Not essential for the task at hand. Your birthday? Adds 0 value to current problem solving. The meeting? It wasn't connected to their active priority stack, so it got deprioritized by their brain's automatic filtering system. This isn't rudeness, it's resource allocation. Studies on attention and memory show that exceptional pattern recognition ability comes at a cost. Reduced encoding of socially normative but cognitively irrelevant information. Their brain is running a different optimization function than yours. You're optimizing for social cohesion. They're optimizing for information processing. Here's your false choice, presented plainly. You can remember everyone's birthday and kids' names and preferred coffee orders, or you can solve interesting problems that require loading complex data structures into working memory. Pick one. The brain doesn't have enough RAM for both. Mediocre minds catalog social details because social details are the most salient information in their environment. Exceptional minds filter ruthlessly because they're processing information you're not tracking. Patterns, systems, abstractions that don't have faces or birthdays. You remember their faux pas, the missed meeting, the forgotten name. You catalog these as evidence of their failure. They don't remember meeting you at all. Not because you're forgettable, but because the conversation you found memorable was, to their brain, the cognitive equivalent of background noise. Your 20-minute fantasy football discussion? They were on autopilot. The actual thinking was happening 3 layers deeper, on a problem you weren't aware they were solving. This is the echo back to Chapter 1. What looked like rudeness at the dinner party was cognitive prioritization. What looks like social incompetence is actually radical honesty about what their brain considers worth encoding. And here's your harsh reality. Your detailed memory of social minutiae isn't a gift. It's where your brain spends processing power that could be allocated to literally anything else. You're proud of remembering names. They're solving problems you don't have the cognitive bandwidth to notice. Being forgettable to smart people isn't an insult. It's just data triage. You're in their RAM when you're relevant to their current task. When you're not, you get paged out to make room for something that matters more. That's not cruelty. That's exactly how your computer works, and you don't call your laptop rude when it doesn't keep every background app open. But this behavior at least makes internal sense. It's the next one that destroys their credibility entirely. The pattern beneath it. All he said, distributed teams don't work, wrote a whole essay about it, presented data, cited studies, made a compelling case that remote work kills innovation. 6 months later, he's advocating for distributed first hiring. Same person, opposite position. No apology, no explanation of what I really meant was. Just a clean reversal with new reasoning. Your reaction, he's inconsistent, unreliable, says whatever's convenient. Can't be trusted because who knows what he'll believe next week. Here's what actually happened. He updated his mental model in real time based on new data, and he did it publicly instead of quietly pretending he never held the previous position. This is Bayesian thinking. It's how scientists operate. It's how intelligence actually functions when it's not being performed for social credit. Prior belief plus new evidence, icar posterior belief. The equation is simple. The execution is humiliating because it requires you to say out loud, I was wrong. Not, I was wrong given what I knew then. That's face-saving. Not, I was partially wrong. That's hedging. Just, I was wrong. Here's why my thinking changed. Insecure people defend positions. Intelligent people defend truth. And truth has this inconvenient property. It doesn't care about your consistency. It doesn't care that you said the opposite thing last quarter. It doesn't care that changing your mind makes you look wishy-washy to people who value certainty over accuracy. Studies on intellectual humility show that the ability to update beliefs in response to evidence is the single strongest predictor of long-term decision-making quality. Not intelligence, not experience. Not confidence. The willingness to be wrong. But here's the contrast that should make you uncomfortable. Every time you double down on a belief to save face, you're choosing ego over evolution. Every time you defend a position you no longer fully believe because admitting error feels like weakness, you're optimizing for social perception over truth. Scientists call it hypothesis refinement. Philosophers call it epistemic humility. You call it flip-flopping, and that semantic difference reveals everything about your priorities. You'd rather be consistently wrong than inconsistently right. You'd rather maintain the illusion of certainty than demonstrate the capacity for growth. They don't have that luxury. Their brain won't let them coast on outdated models. New information forces model updates. And they're not going to perform mental gymnastics to pretend their old position was secretly compatible with their new position all along. Here's your harsh reality. The person who changes their mind publicly is showing you their cognitive process in real time. They're letting you see the mechanism that makes them smarter over time. And you're punishing them for it because you've confused consistency with correctness. The pattern beneath the pattern. Stop for a second. Look at all 5 behaviors together. Interrupting themselves mid-sentence. Asking questions. Everyone else except it. Letting silence sit uncomfortably long. Forgetting socially important details. Changing their mind publicly. What do they have in common? Every single one trades social comfort for cognitive accuracy. Every single one prioritizes truth over performance. Every single one makes them look worse to you while making them think better. This is the pattern you've been missing. Intelligence isn't about being right. Intelligence is about being willing to be wrong in public. It's about choosing precision over fluency. It's about asking the question that makes everyone uncomfortable because the answer matters more than the comfort. You thought these were social deficits. They're cognitive advantages that come with social costs, and now you have to choose what to do with this information. The price. Here's what no one tells you about these 5 behaviors. They will isolate you socially, not metaphorically, literally. You will have fewer friends. You will get fewer dinner party invitations. You will be labeled as difficult in performance reviews. People will stop including you in conversations because you make things awkward. This isn't speculation. This is the documented cost. Studies on social dynamics show that groups naturally exclude members who violate conversational norms, even when those violations produce better outcomes. Teams rate non-conforming members as less likable even when they rate them as more competent. Humans will choose comfortable incompetence over uncomfortable excellence almost every time. Most people prefer comfortable certainty over uncomfortable intelligence. They want you to be smooth, not accurate. Consistent, not correct. Easy, not true. And if you display these 5 behaviors, you're violating that social contract. You're refusing to perform certainty you don't feel. You're declining to fill silence with noise. You're making people confront their unexamined assumptions. You're demonstrating that you value truth over their approval. They will punish you for it. Not consciously, not maliciously. Just the natural consequence of being cognitively mismatched to your social environment. You're running a different operating system, and everyone else experiences your processes as bugs. The intelligent person's internal experience, solving interesting problems, optimizing for accuracy, updating beliefs based on evidence, allocating cognitive resources efficiently. The external perception, scattered, difficult, awkward, unreliable, rude. That gap never closes. You can't explain it away. You can't make people understand that your pause was processing, not absence. You can't convince them that your question was valuable, not disruptive. You can't reframe your forgotten birthday as resource allocation rather than negligence. They're not listening for your explanation. They already have their story about who you are. So here's your actual choice, presented without the false comfort of a middle ground. You can blend in. You can smooth out your speech, stop asking the hard questions, fill the silences, remember the birthdays, and defend your positions even when you know they're wrong. You can optimize for social acceptance. It works. People will like you. You'll get invited places. You'll be seen as a team player, or you can stand out. You can let your cognitive process be visible. You can trade fluency for precision. You can ask the questions that make rooms go cold. You can forget names while remembering patterns. You can change your mind when the evidence changes. You can optimize for truth. It works differently. You'll be right more often. You'll solve harder problems. You'll be alone more. Pick one. The person who interrupted themselves at that dinner party, they weren't nervous. They weren't scattered. They just knew you wouldn't understand the distinction they were making anyway. They saw 3 moves ahead in the conversation, calculated that explaining their actual thought would require backfilling context you didn't have, and decided the social cost of looking flustered was lower than the cognitive cost of dumbing down their point. They made that calculation in 1.3 seconds while you were deciding they couldn't finish a coherent thought. Intelligence isn't about what you do. It's about whether you're brave enough to be misunderstood while you do it. The question isn't whether you're intelligent. The question is whether you're willing to look stupid long enough to prove it.